So we are reading Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. We are on chapter, one second. We are on chapter 4, page number 91 of the book, and page number, Shimangla, page number
18 of the PDF.
Okay.
Energy level 540, joy. As love becomes more and more unconditional, it begins to be experienced as inner joy. This is not the sudden joy of a pleasurable turn of events. It is a constant accompaniment to all activities. Joy arises from within each moment of existence rather than from any outer source. 540 is also the level of healing and of spiritually based self-help groups.
So what is he talking about here? Okay. When you transcend love and you get into joy, then you start experiencing joy in everything that you do, right? Everything you find something to appreciate, everything you find gratitude in. You start looking at things from a totally different perspective. And it is always uplifting. It is always giving, right? You get and you give at the same time. That is why all self-help groups exist at this level. So if a self-help group is running for a long time and there are no politics involved, right? In a true self-help group, there will be no politics because they're running at the level of consciousness of 540. As soon as groupism starts to come in and power players start to come in, the level of consciousness starts to drop. As we will see going forward, they've actually measured the level of consciousness of various things, groups, etc.
540 is also the level of healing and of spiritually based self-help groups. From level 540 up is the domain of saints, spiritual healers, and advanced spiritual students. Characteristic of this energy field is a capacity for enormous patience and the persistence of a positive attitude in the face of prolonged adversity. The hallmark of this state is compassion. People who have attained this level have a notable effect on others. They are capable of prolonged open visual gaze, which induces a state of love and peace.
So patience, right? The ability to maintain their center in spite of adversity. So what are we talking about all the time? To find our equanimity, to find our center, to be able to be still when everything is going wrong around us. People operating in this state of consciousness are extremely compassionate. So you'll find that saints, when you go into their field, compassion flows from them. They are out to help anyone that they can help. They will go out of their way to support people around them. And this is very important over here. They are capable of prolonged open visual gaze, which induces a state of love and peace. So see, we always used to say that you emit energy very powerfully from two places, from the hands and from the eyes, right? So a person who's operating at a lower state of consciousness will not be able to hold your gaze. Okay. Now, when a highly spiritual person is there, you will find they can hold your gaze for a long period of time without blinking. So when you look at a person and you look at the eyes of a person, you can understand what is the depth of that particular person. If you look at Robert Monroe's eyes, you'll find a depth in the eyes, right? It shows you can actually see the evolution of a person if you look deeply into the eyes of a person. And then when they hold your gaze, it is filled with love and compassion. It really transforms you. That's why when we go and sit in front of saints, and spiritual leaders, right, who really have that core within them, you will find that compassion and love flowing from them. And it is generally done with the eyes. So that's why we call drishti, right? Nazar lag gaya. What does that mean? That you're seeing, and because you're seeing in a depleting way, you can harm the other person. But it works the opposite way in the case of saints. When they look at you, their blessings flow to you. So this is very important.
The high 500s, the world one sees is illuminated by the exquisite beauty and perfection of creation. Everything happens effortlessly by synchronicity, and the world and everything in it is seen to be an expression of love and divinity. Individual will merge, individual will merges into divine will. A presence is felt whose power facilitates phenomena outside conventional expectations of reality, termed miraculous by the ordinary observer. These phenomena represent the power of the energy field, not the individual.
So, so when a person is operating at these levels of consciousness, you're shifting your state, and we are constantly talking about this, from effortfulness to effortlessness, from controlling to trusting, from making something happen to things happening on their own. Synchronicity starts to come into the game. It comes into the flow, right? You drop your will and you start jacking into the flow, right? So you're connected with the divine will. You accept what is happening, you trust what is happening. That shift in your consciousness automatically starts to take place. And that this is also the state that we call, when the sages and all used to say tathastu, they used to say it and used to manifest. Why? Because their will is totally in tune with the divine will, with the universal consciousness. And then the consciousness also responds because they are in connection with them. And naturally, so miraculous things start to happen. They'll think of a rasgulla and a rasgulla will appear. Someone will bring it or it will come. How it comes, we don't know, right? All of us actually experience the synchronicity also, that you're thinking of eating something and you reach home and your mother has made it, or your wife has got it, or it has come to your house from somewhere. So that is when we are tapping into that state of consciousness. But people who are operating constantly in these states, these things constantly happen to them.
At the high 500s, the world one sees is illuminated by the exquisite beauty and perfection of creation. Everything happens effortlessly by synchronicity, and the world and everything in it is seen to be an expression of love and divinity. Individual will merges into divine will. A presence is felt whose power facilitates phenomena outside conventional expectations of reality, termed miraculous by the ordinary observer. These phenomena represent the power of the energy fields, not the individual.
So I missed this, right? The phenomena represents the power of the energy field, not the individual. So the individual will not say that I did it, right? It happened. The field facilitated it. I got a download. So those things start to happen, right? The field is creating the occurrence. The person is not creating the occurrence.
One's sense of responsibility for others at this level is of a different quality from that shown at the lower levels. There is a desire to use one state of consciousness for the benefit of life itself, rather than for particular individuals. This capacity to love many people simultaneously is accompanied by the discovery that the more one loves, the more one can love.
So again, these people who are operating at these levels of consciousness, they start becoming for the whole, right? They don't get stuck with certain individuals. And this is one of the reasons that when you start becoming highly spiritual, your connection with your immediate family is not, you're not looking out only for your family. You're looking out for anyone and everyone around you. And at times that can peeve the personal family. But the personal family, if is evolving together with that person, then it will not remain a problem, right? So it is again a matter of evolving into these states of consciousness.
Near-death experiences, characteristically transformative in their effect, frequently have allowed people to experience the energy level between 540 and 600.
So what is a near-death experience? It's a basically NDE is a near-death experience where a person actually flatlines on the monitors, goes into an altered state of consciousness, experiences that there, and then comes back into the state of consciousness. And frequently it has been seen that people who have near-death experiences, how they are dealing with stuff around them, their nature, the character can undergo a very big transformation, right? They actually start seeing a bigger picture than what they had seen or they had operated at previously. Because they have observed, they've actually experienced that there is a lot more beyond this 3D physical world in which we actually live. And we previously considered that this is the only reality. They have actually experienced that there is a much larger and a much brighter and a much more expansive universe out there, or in here. When you go deeper into yourself, it can be both ways, but there is a much bigger field of conscious awareness than what we are experiencing at this moment in time. Also, what happens is that maybe we'll read Proof of Heavens also in our book reading over here. But in that Proof of Heaven, Dr. Eben Alexander, he went into that expanded state of consciousness. He had a near-death experience. His entire, he got meningitis of the brain. And the doctors told him that he could not survive because his brain was totally filled with pus. But in that state, when he went away, he flatlined. He had certain experiences which he could not collate. He had no way of actually comprehending what he had experienced in that state of consciousness. But he was aware, he was experiencing things, although according to medical doctors, he could not have been experiencing anything because his brain was full of pus and it could not process any data. Now, he could not wrap his head around it once he came back. But then when he went to the Monroe Institute and he did the Gateway Voyage, he actually went to that same state of consciousness that he had experienced when he was having a near-death experience. And only after that, he was able to actually collate and to understand what that experience was all about, right? So again, when we are going into these expanded states, we are able to experience these states in a very, very safe way when we use the Monroe processes.
Level 600, peace. This energy field is associated with experience designated by such terms as transcendence, realization, and God consciousness. It is extremely rare, attained by only 1 in 10 million people. When this state is reached, the distinction between subject and object disappears, and there is no specific focal point of perception. Not uncommonly, individuals at this level remove themselves from the world as the state of bliss that ensues precludes ordinary activity. Some become spiritual teachers, others work anonymously for the betterment of mankind. A few become great geniuses in their respective fields and make major contributions to society. These people are saintly and may eventually be designated officially as saints. Though at this level, formal religion is commonly transcended, replaced by the pure spirituality out of which all religion originates.
So again, as we raise our frequency of vibration, If people around us are not raising the level of same vibration, then naturally they drop out, right? We cannot associate with them anymore. That's why we commonly say that people who attend the Monroe programs, at least the excursion, etc., at that level, you will find that the people who you resonate with will start to shift. You will start associating with a different set of people. Right. So now people who are operating at 600 are looking for peace. They're looking for harmony. They're looking for creating peace and harmony around them all the time. Right. Here, religion stops to matter. It is a spiritual essence that they are really looking for. It's the truth. It's what is that is connected to this level of consciousness. They will not be trapped by any kind of dogmas, etc. They will actually be perceiving what they are perceiving, and they will act accordingly.
Perception at the level of 600 and above is sometimes reported as occurring in slow motion, suspended in time and space, though nothing is stationary. All is alive and radiant. Although this world is the same world seen by others, it has become continuously flowing, evolving in an exquisitely coordinated evolutionary dance in which significance and source are overwhelming. This awesome revelation takes place non rationally, so that there is an infinite silence in the mind, which has stopped conceptualizing. That which is witnessing and that which is witnessed take on the same identity. The observer dissolves into the landscape and becomes equally and observed. Everything is connected to everything else by a presence whose power is infinite, exquisitely gentle, yet rock solid.
So you are moving into a state of oneness. Okay, there is no distinction left. Everything is you and you are everything. You are witnessing and doing at the same time. Everything you feel, everything is connected. Every field is connected. Everything around you is interrelated to everything else. So we go back to that thing where if a butterfly flutters its wings in Brazil, it affects the entire universe. So these people actually experience that state. We are making a statement, but they actually undergo the experience of that state, that inner stillness, that inner harmony, where everything is happening around them and they are the center. They can witness and actually be everything at the same time.
Great works of art, music, and architecture, which calibrate between 600 and 700, can transport us temporarily to higher levels of consciousness and are universally recognized as inspirational and timeless.
So again, when you have art, so what is the level of consciousness at which anything around us is radiating, right? If it is radiating at a, or it is existing at a higher state of consciousness and we engage with it, it will automatically start to raise our level of consciousness. So when I look at it, the idea here should be that we should hook up with anyone who is operating at a higher level of consciousness than us, so that we can move ahead with that particular person. And this has been seen, right? It's not only at the level of consciousness. If someone is a good carpenter, if that person touches you while you are doing carpentry, your level, and he's at a higher level than you, by just touching you or you being in his field, your competence of doing carpentry will start to rise up. So again, we come back to that notion that if you know the 5 people with whom a person spends the maximum amount of time, you can get to know what kind of a person that person is, right? Because the field of the people that you associate with will rub off on you. So like that, music, art, any kind of object, right, can transport you. You can even rate the consciousness of a book. You can rate the consciousness of any kind of music, which they'll be talking about later. Different kinds of music have a different level of consciousness. So what are you listening to? What are you reading? What are you seeing? All these factors affect the level of consciousness at which you are operating.
Energy levels 700 to 1000. Enlightenment. This is the level of the great ones of history who originated the spiritual patterns which multitudes have followed through the ages. All are associated with divinity, with which they are often identified. It is the level of powerful inspiration. These beings set in place attractor energy fields, which influence all of mankind.
So again, we've talked about attractor fields, right? When people are when anyone is operating at this level of consciousness, these attractor fields become extremely powerful. So they attract a lot of people towards them.
At this level, there is no longer the experience of an individual personal self separate from others. Rather, there is an identification of self with consciousness and divinity. The unmanifest is experienced as self beyond mind. This transcendence of the ego also serves by example to teach others how this can eventually be accomplished. This is the peak of the evolution of consciousness in the human realm.
So what is he saying here? The unmanifested is experienced as self beyond the mind. So our ego is connected with the mind. When a person goes into this level of consciousness, they experience their self as beyond the ego and beyond the mind, right? We transcend the ego totally. There is no separateness. Everything is, that's it. You're in that state of isness when we get into this state of consciousness. And the great teachers are always operating at these levels of consciousness. Otherwise, they would not become that great teachers if that level of consciousness was not there.
At this level, there is no longer the experience of an individual personal self separate from others. Rather, there is an identification of self with consciousness and divinity. The unmanifest is experienced as self beyond mind. This transcendence of the ego also serves by example to teach others how this can eventually be accomplished. This is the peak of the evolution of consciousness in the human realm. Great teachings uplift the masses and raise the level of awareness of all of humanity. To have such vision is called grace, and the gift it brings is infinite peace, described as ineffable, beyond words. At this level of realization, the sense of one's existence transcends all time and all individuality. There is no longer any identification with the physical body as me, and therefore its fate is of no concern.
So when we reach this state of consciousness, the physicality of things stops being important. They really don't care about what happens to their body. This is one of the reasons that you will find that many of these saints, they land up getting cancer towards the end, because they really don't bother. If they really wanted to heal themselves, they could easily have healed themselves. But many of them land up with cancer, okay, because their body is no longer important for them, that they need to pay so much attention to the physical body.
The body is seen as merely a tool of consciousness through the intervention of mind, its prime value that of communication. Merges back into the self. This is the level of non-duality or complete oneness. there is no localization of consciousness. Awareness is everywhere, equally present.
So again, total oneness, right? We've gone into total oneness. There is no distinction with anything. You love, you care, and you are everything. So you cannot mistreat anything, because if you're mistreating it, you are mistreating yourself. So there is no distinction between the self and anything else.
Great works of art depicting individuals who have reached the level of enlightenment characteristically show the teacher with a specific hand position called mudra, wherein the palm of the hand radiates benediction. This is the act of the transmission of this energy field to the consciousness of mankind. This level of divine grace calibrates up to 1,000, the highest level attained by any persons who have lived in recorded history, to wit, the great avatars to whom the title Lord is appropriate, Lord Krishna, Lord Buddha, and Lord Jesus Christ.
Right? So again, 1,000 is the highest level of consciousness in this particular scale. And as I mentioned, there are two places from which we can radiate energy. One is the hands and the other is the eyes. So over here, you'll find most of our Devi Devtas, they'll always have a hand like this, right? Blessings are always being given and showered by the hands. And incidentally, when we take aura pictures, we are actually putting the palms on these plates, which captures the frequency of energy being radiated. And every color has its own frequency, capturing it and putting onto film. Using that, we can actually be able to assess what's the auric field of a particular person, giving us insight into that particular person. There is, I had taken one aura photo where this person had gone into a trance, a divine being was entering into them. And when I took that picture, many of you may have seen it, it was a total violet picture, right? Violet, I don't see normally in aura pictures. It normally comes when a person has surrendered, but it comes when they are in trouble or they are sick. That was the only picture which I got as a spiritual picture when the entity had entered, and there was a shift in the total state of consciousness. And with that entity in that person, the person was doing a lot of healing of various people. Amazing kind of healings actually took place when that energy was in that particular person when we took that picture. So again, shifts of consciousness to oneness. That is the hallmark of anything above 700. Okay, so we are going to move to chapter 5. Anyone has any questions, anything that anyone would like to say? Have you all been using the ring test that we discussed in the first few sessions to actually just allow yourself to collate what level of consciousness that you are operating at? Has anyone done it? No one has done it. Okay, no one wants to share. Chalo, let's move ahead, then we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah,
Priyanka, go ahead.
Ask you a question regarding the near-death experience.
Yeah.
And what you spoke about the altered state of consciousness.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to ask you, what happens exactly when they go through the near-death and then they come back into the human form? Why do they have the altered level? Is it because they reached another level before and then they are coming back, so their way and their perception has changed completely, or is it something else?
Yeah, so I keep using this example. If I see something from here, how much do I see? I see only so much. If I look at it from here, I see so much. If I look at it from here, I see so much. Right? Now, when we are here, we are looking at it from here. Now, in near that, you've gone there. Right? Now, you've seen the whole picture, or you've seen a bigger picture. So now, is this small picture valid when I've seen the bigger picture?
Okay. So that perception changes completely.
Absolutely.
Because you see the whole thing. Okay.
Conception changes because your perception, you've seen something which is beyond what you normally see. So your perception will change.
And what about those people who have those outer body experience? What about them? What level of consciousness do they?
Same. So they are also going into expanded states. They are experiencing things in a different level. They understand that they can exist without the physical body. Just now, and they experienced it, right? That I can exist without the body. So now doesn't the perception change?
Okay. That's what
So again, I'm repeating, attend the workshop.
Okay. Thank you.
You'll experience all this at the programs.
Okay, looking forward. Thank you, Bhaiya.
Yeah.
Chapter 5, Social Distribution of Consciousness Levels. General description. A graphic representation of the distribution of the respective energy levels among the world's population would resemble the shape of a pagoda roof, in that 85% of the race is below the critical level of 200, while the overall average level of human consciousness today is approximately 204.
Okay, so what is he saying over here? That most people are operating at a lower level of consciousness, that is below 200. And the other day we had pulled up the chart, and the chart has been posted in the book reading group. You will find that everything that calibrates at below 200 puts you on the left side of the grid. So what he's saying here is 85% of the people are operating in the left side of the grid. So you can imagine, can any manifestation take place from the left side of the grid? In my view, it can't. So when people are miserable, things are not happening their way, it is because they are operating on the left side of the grid and not on the right side of the grid. So now 85% are below 200 and the average is 204 or 207, right? So that means there are that 15% which is operating beyond 200 is pulling the average of the entire humanity from below 200 to just above 200. Okay, so you can imagine what the disparity is. If more people start becoming consciously aware of this, imagine where humanity can actually transcend to or grow to, right? All war, all famine, everything happens at below 200 levels. Above 200 levels, there's contentment, there's peace, there's harmony, there's joy. There is no dissidence, there is no illness, technically speaking, because you don't experience it as illness. It all happens below 200.
The power of the relatively few individuals near the top counterbalances the weakness of the masses towards the bottom to achieve this overall average. As mentioned, only 0.4% of the world's population calibrates at an energy field of 500 or over. A level of consciousness calibrating at 600 or over is reached by only 1 in 10 million. At first glance, these figures may seem improbable, but if we examine world conditions, we will quickly be reminded that the populations of whole subcontinents live at a bare subsistence level. Famine and disease are commonplace, frequently accompanied by political oppression and paucity of social resources. Many of such people live in a state of hopelessness, calibrating at the level of apathy, in resignation to their abject poverty. We must also realize that much of the remainder of the world's population, civilized as well as primitive, lives primarily in fear. The majority of humans spend their lives in a quest for one form or another of security. Those whose lifestyles transcend the imperative of survival to allow discretionary options become grist for the desire-driven world, economic mill, and success in attainment of desires leads at best to pride.
Okay. So if you see, what is he saying over here? That most of the world's population is living at apathy, which calibrates at 50, right? The rest of the world is running, right? Most of us are in the rat race. So where do you, when you're in the rat race, you actually calibrate at the level of fear, which is only at 100. And when you acquire enough where you can actually start having money to spend or resources at your, at your beck and call, we transcend into an egoistic state of consciousness, which will maximum calibrate at 175, which is pride. Now, 85% of the world's population is operating in these levels. Okay.
Any meaningful human satisfaction cannot even commence until about the level of 250, where some degree of self-confidence begins to emerge as a basis for positive life experiences in the evolution of consciousness.
So now this is a very important thing that he has actually mentioned over here, right? So what he's clearly saying is that you really start living when you get to the level of consciousness of 250. Below that, you are just about surviving. That's it. You're not really living. So when you want happiness, you want to be fulfilled, you want to feel complete, let us put it that way, you will not experience it if your level of consciousness is not at 250. Okay. So this becomes very important. In fact, today I was doing a biofield tuning session and this thing came up. So what level of consciousness are you acting in any given situation in your life? Okay. You need to be clear about what level of consciousness you're operating in that situation. The moment you start becoming aware of it, it will allow you to start shifting your state of conscious awareness to a higher level of consciousness. So, for example, if someone is living in apathy, right, they are living in hopelessness and they start getting angry, it's a good thing because they are shifting their level from 50 to 150. But they are still not living life. They are still not happy, but they've at least increased their or lifted up their state of consciousness. So that's why awareness of these processes become very, very important. Now, if you look at it, you can work with the chart of levels of consciousness with the resilience grid. They work in a very nice manner. Because if you start with the simple task of just assessing which side of the grid are you operating from whenever you're doing anything, it will automatically tell you that whether you're in the depleting state or are you in an uplifting state. Once you do that, you can start to refine it for your better understanding by looking at the chart of consciousness, at what state of consciousness you're operating. So anything below 200 is automatically putting you on the left side of the grid. But what is the state you're operating on? You can use the chart to figure that out. I think they both work beautifully in conjunction with each other.
Cultural correlations. The energy fields below 200 are most common in extremely primitive conditions where people eke out bare subsistence. Clothing is sparse, illiteracy is the rule. Infant mortality is high, disease and malnutrition are widespread, and there is a vacuum of social power. Skills are rudimentary and center around fuel and food gathering and generation, and there is total dependence on the vagaries of the immediate environment. This is the Stone Age cultural level, little more than animal existence.
So this is just bare survival, right? So literally speaking, if you're operating below 200, you are just about surviving. You're not looking at any kind of growth. You're not looking at any kind of self-upliftment. It's just basic subsistence and survival.
Populations characterized by the low 200s are typified by unskilled labor, rudimentary trade, the building of simple artifacts such as dugout canoes and temporary housing. Mobility begins to express itself in the nomadic lifestyle and in populations that average a somewhat higher consciousness. Agriculture appears and barter evolves into the use of token currency.
So this is the level of unskilled labor, where they don't really have too much of intelligence. They are living just by instinct, literally speaking.
The mid 200s are associated with semi skilled labor, simple but life sustaining housing and food economy become dependably available. Clothing is adequate and elementary education begins. The high 200s are represented by skilled labor, blue-collared workers, tradesmen, retail commerce and industries. At lower levels, for example, fishing is an individual or a tribe activity, but above the mid 200s, it becomes an industry. At the level of 300, we find technicians, skilled and advanced craftsmen, routine managers, and a more sophisticated business structure. Completion of secondary education becomes customary. There is an interest in style, sport, and public entertainment. Television is the great pastime of this level.
So as we are going through the levels, right, different levels of consciousness are basically there with different characteristics. So you have a band that people will exist in this band.
In the mid 300s, we find upper management, artisans, and educators with an informed awareness of public events and a worldview that extends beyond the tribe, neighborhood, or city to the nation at large and its welfare. Social dialogue becomes a meaningful matter of interest. Survival has been assured by the acquisition of skills and information, adequate to function as a civilized society. There is a social mobility and flexibility and resources which enable a limited amount of travel and other stimulating recreation.
So now at this level, recreation also starts to come in. Below that, you're basically surviving, right? So there's no resources available for recreation and other kinds of activities.
The 400s are the level of the awakening of the intellect, the locus of true literacy, higher education, the professional class, executives and scientists. The home devoid of reading material at the lower levels here exhibits magazines, periodicals, and full bookcases. There is an interest in educational broadcast channels and a more sophisticated political awareness. Great communication, adeptness, intellectual preoccupation, and artistic creativity are common. Recreational activities take the form of chess, travel, theatre. Civic enterprises intended to enhance the social milieu receive serious attention. Supreme Court justices, presidents, statesmen, inventors, and leaders of industry occupy this general range. Because education is the underpinning of this level, individuals tend to gather in metropolitan areas where they have access to sources of information and instruction, such as great universities. Some aspire to faculty status. Others become lawyers or members of the professional classes. The welfare of one's fellow man is a common concern. though not yet a driving force. The high 400s are associated with leaders in their respective fields and with high social prestige, accomplishment, and corresponding social trappings. Both Einstein and Freud calibrate at 499, but while the 400s are the level of universities and doctorates, they are also the source of the limited and limiting Newtonian vision of the universe and of the Cartesian split between mind and body. Newton and Descartes also calibrate at 499.
So again, at this level, they are educators, like they are doctors, they are architects, but they are stuck in their belief system. They are not willing to go beyond what they have learned, right? So they get stuck, and it doesn't allow abstract thinking, spiritual thinking to happen. They are stuck in the materialistic aspect of things if they are still around the 400 levels.
Just as the level 200 demarcates a critical change of consciousness, 500 is a point at which awareness makes another giant leap. Although survival of the individual is still important, the motivation of love begins to color all activities, and creativity comes into full expression, accompanied by commitment, dedication, and expressions of charisma. Here, excellence is common in every field of human endeavor, from sport to scientific investigation. Altruism becomes a motivating factor along with dedication to principles. Leadership is accepted rather than sought. From this level emerges great music, art, and architecture, and the capacity to uplift others by one's mere presence.
So again, at this level, right, people become extremely dedicated to what they do. They are committed to what they are doing, right? They have found their ikigai. They are they they are very disciplined. You know, discipline starts to come in when you are operating at the level of 500. You are looking beyond yourself, right? So your self-interest takes a backseat. The interest of the whole, what is for the greater good, starts to take precedence over your own desires and your own will. So that is where greatness starts to stem from.
In the upper 500s are found inspirational leaders who set an example for the rest of society and in their respective fields, create new paradigms with far-reaching implications for all of mankind. Although well aware themselves that they still have defects and limitations, people on this level are often seen by the general public as out of the ordinary and may be recognized with emblems of distinction. Many in the mid 500s begin to have spiritual experiences of profound import and become immersed in spiritual pursuit. Some astonish their friends and families by sudden breakthroughs into new subjective contexts of reality. Consciousness at this level can be described as vision and may focus on uplifting society as a whole. From this level, a few make the great leap to the region which calibrates at 600. At this point, an individual's life may become legendary. The signature of the 600s is compassion, pervading all motivation and activity.
So, of course, anyone operating at 500 is so giving that people start to look at them from different eyes. They put them in a pedestal. But the people operating at this level know that they still have their faults. They still have the fallacies, right? And they are aware of it. And they attempt to transcend them. They're constantly working on themselves also to be able to move into higher states of consciousness, right? again, when you come into this level, that is where spiritual aspirations, spiritual connections, all these things start to generally manifest. And of course, the level of 600, you become totally compassionate, you become peaceful, you become totally present. All those things naturally start to happen at 600.
Progression of consciousness. Although the levels we have described span great variation, it is not common for individuals to move from one level to another during their lifetimes. The energy field, which is calibrated for an individual at birth, only increases, on the average, by about 5 points. That an individual's level of consciousness is already in effect at birth is a sobering idea with profound implications. Consciousness itself, in its expression as human civilization, evolves slowly indeed through innumerable generations.
Okay, so over here he says that you evolve only 5 points, right? But in my view, because of all the technology, all the other aspirations that we are getting, we can evolve at a higher rate. Also, the fact is that in various aspects of your life, you are actually operating at different levels of consciousness. So you have an overall effect, and then you can have a specific effect. You can also, in a particular given incident, calibrate at what level of consciousness were you operating at that level, and then what are the strategies that you can use to shift your level of consciousness so that you can transcend the issues that you're facing in that particular situation in which you were calibrated at a lower level of consciousness.
The majority of people utilize their life experiences to express the variations of their native energy field. It is the rare individual who manages to move beyond it, although many may make considerable internal improvement. The reason for this is more easily understandable when we see that what defines one's level is motivation. Motivation proceeds from meaning, and meaning, in turn, is an expression of context. Thus, achievement is bounded by context, which, when correspondingly aligned with motivation, determines the individual's relative power.
So what he is basically talking about is your belief system and whether you can develop the motivation to transcend your belief system and get onto the growth path. So again, this is something that Robert Monroe talks about very, very clearly in the Gateway Voyage, that we are stuck here because of our belief system. And all of us have come here simply to transcend our belief system, right? When we look at it from Vedanta, Nagarji keeps saying, why are we here? Why have you top-code here? He says, right? So you've top-code to only run, top-code to transcend, top-code to get into bliss, to get into a state of consciousness of moksha, right? What is that? When we are getting into consciousness states which are beyond 700, it is leading to moksha because you're no longer connected with the physical anymore. You are going into transcendental states of consciousness and transcendental states of awareness. So basically, that's the game, to transcend your belief system. Yes, Renuji?
Bhaiya, earlier than this, you had said you are almost born with the kind of consciousness that you are at what level you're going to be. So is it really possible that a person, even with all this thing,
I just said that where after we read that paragraph, I made the statement that with conscious awareness, you can transcend it. You can go ahead. It says generally people don't move beyond 5 points. But it doesn't mean that you can't, right? If you start moving, that's what is the essence of this paragraph that we just read. Okay, so the achievement is bound by context, which is correspondingly aligned with motivation, determines the individual's relative power. So if you are motivated, you can transcend your level of consciousness and move into higher levels of consciousness. It is
Okay.
clearly saying that over here.
Okay, so that means that 5% is only that's the normal thing that a person would
Yeah.
transcend.
So normal
But
people, if you see, they are living on the street, they'll keep living on the street. They've not
but there'll
lifted
be
themselves.
one person who will sort of just rise
Exactly. One
above
person may
everything,
get
though he doesn't have
motivated. Yeah. He gets motivated or she gets motivated to get out of that
the
syndrome.
thing.
So
Yeah,
they
that one
transcend the
day
belief
will come
system.
out.
Yeah.
Understood. Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
The average advance of a mere 5 points is a lifetime in a lifetime is of course a statistical figure produced by, among other things, the unfortunate fact that people's cumulative life choices not uncommonly result in a net lowering of their level of consciousness.
So now this becomes a very important sentence here. The unfortunate fact that people's cumulative life choices many times result in the lowering of their level of consciousness. So when you look at it from the Vedantic principles, you have the prarabdha vasanas and you have the sanchit vasanas. Now, if we are doing things which is increasing our sanchit vasanas, by acting the way that we are acting just now, it will lower the level of consciousness. So when we again look at it from Vedantic principles, the person who transcends has removed all his sanchit vasanas, right? And is acting out only the prarabdha, that was the only vasanas which are left, are being acted out, and then that person will transcend into another level of consciousness. Okay, so the point here becomes that the choices that we are making while we are living here determine how we are going to proceed, how we are going to progress. That's why our thoughts, the actions that we are taking, what are we doing, what are we thinking, what are we being, starts to become very important in our process of evolution.
As will be enumerated in detail later, the influence of a very few individuals of advanced consciousness counterbalances whole populations at the lower levels. But conversely, the extreme negativity of a few perverse individuals can sway entire cultures and produce a global drag on the general level of consciousness, as history illustrates too well. Kinesiological testing indicates that a mere 2.6% of the human population identifiable by an abnormal kinesiological polarity, testing strong to negative attractors and weak to positive attractors, accounts for 72% of society's problems.
So most people are attracted to the lower levels rather than going into higher aspirational levels.
Nonetheless, it is possible for isolated individuals to make sudden positive jumps, even of hundreds of points, if one can truly escape the egocentric entrainment of the sub 200 attractor fields, consciously choosing a friendly, earnest, kind, and forgiving approach to life, and eventually making charity towards others one's primary focus, higher levels can certainly be attained. At least in theory, in practice, great will is required.
So what it's clearly saying, Renuji, this is for you, that by conscious effort, by consciously being aware of what is happening, you can make progress of hundreds of points, right? So the general population is stuck with a growth of only 5 points, and many times instead of growing, they devolve. They go down in the level of consciousness, but it is absolutely possible to evolve faster.
But Bhaiya, it's so beautiful the way it's connected to our Vedanta also.
101%. It is all written. All.
It's so fantastic. And now because, you know, you can compare the two the way you're doing it. It's
Yeah.
super.
So I'm grateful to Nagarji for getting me involved in monitoring the Vedantic sessions also.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. Yeah.
Thus, though it is not ordinary to move out of one's energy field into another during one's lifetime, the opportunity still exists. It remains for motivation to activate that potential. Without the exercise of choice, no progression will occur. It is well to re emphasize that the progression of the calibrated power levels is logarithmic. Thus, individual choice can have a mighty effect. The difference in power level, for instance, between 361 and 361.0 and 361, one is very, pardon? Oh, 1.1 is very significant and capable of transforming both one's life and one's effect on the world at large.
So what it's saying is that even a 0.1 difference can have a huge impact at the higher levels of consciousness, right? And when one sets intent, when one takes the opportunities that the universe is offering, start saying yes to what is growth, to what is putting you on the right side of the grid, what is raising your level of consciousness, it is possible to make huge jumps in the level of consciousness that you experience. Okay, I think a wonderful reading. Anyone would like to say anything?
Bhaiya, I love the way you connected to the Vedanta. I love the way you've done that, you know.
No, but it's a fact, right? Everything.
Yeah, of
is a
course
fact.
it's a fact, but it's nice when you've done that for us, you know.
You can
It's very
stop the
nice.
recording.